The evening lights shimmered through the tall glass windows of the Grand Hilton ballroom. The air smelled faintly of perfume and expensive champagne. Laughter echoed from every corner as men in tuxedos and women in sparkling dresses filled the room. It was one of those nights where everything looked perfect. Perfect food, perfect music, perfect smiles. But behind all that perfection was a group of people working silently to make it all happen. Among them was a young waitress named Lena. Lena moved quietly between the tables, balancing a silver tray filled with glasses of wine. She wore a crisp white shirt, a black vest, and a polite smile. Her hair was tied neatly in a bun, though a few loose strands escaped as the night went on. She looked like any other staff member, but inside her heart was a story most people didn't know. Every time she passed by the grand piano in the corner of the ballroom, her eyes lingered for a second too long. The glossy black instrument sat under a soft light, waiting for the hired musician to begin. Lena had played piano once every day for years. There was a time when her fingers could dance across the keys like they were part of her. But that was before life became complicated, before bills, before she had to give up her dream. She had been working at the hotel for almost a year now. It wasn't her dream job, but it paid the rent and helped her mother at home. Her shifts were long. Her feet hurt most nights, and sometimes when she got home past midnight, she'd sit on her small couch and close her eyes, pretending her fingers were still moving over piano keys. She could almost hear the sound of her old upright piano, the one her father had bought secondhand when she was just a child. That old piano had been her escape. Whenever she was sad or angry or lost, she would sit at it for hours. Her father used to say that when she played, the whole house felt lighter, as if her music chased away every bit of sadness. But when her father passed away suddenly, things changed. Her mother couldn't afford to keep her in music school, and the piano was eventually sold to cover debts. Still, even after all those years, the sound of a piano could stop Lena in her tracks. Tonight it did again. She was setting down empty glasses when she heard the pianist warming up. A few soft notes floated through the air, slow, gentle, like a memory coming back to life. Her heart squeezed. She turned slightly to look, pretending to fix her tray, but really she was just listening. The pianist was an older man, dressed in a dark suit, his fingers gliding effortlessly over the keys. The melody was simple, but it was the kind of sound that stirred something deep inside her. A fellow waiter noticed her pause and whispered, "Hey, you okay?" Lena blinked and forced a small smile. "Yeah, just tired." She went back to work, but her thoughts were far away. Every note seemed to tug at her. She remembered the feeling of sitting in front of a piano, the cool touch of the keys, the way each sound vibrated through her fingertips. For a moment, she almost forgot she was in a hotel ballroom surrounded by the city's richest guests. The event was a charity gala, organized by a luxury brand. The guests were influential people, business owners, artists, celebrities. Cameras flashed as photographers captured their laughter and conversation. To them, Lena was invisible, just another uniform blending into the background. But she didn't mind. In some ways, she preferred it that way. Being unseen meant she could observe. She liked watching people, how they smiled politely, how they talked with their hands, how they laughed too loudly after a few glasses of champagne. As the evening went on, Lena and the other waiters kept moving like a quiet rhythm behind the noise of the party. The pianist played through several songs, filling the room with elegant tunes. At one point, the event manager, a man named Mr. Hales, called Lena over to the side. "Table 7 needs refills," he said quickly. "And be careful with the tray this time, all right?" "Yes, sir," Lena said softly, nodding. Mr. Hales wasn't unkind, but he was strict. He ran every event with military precision, and he noticed everything, from a crooked napkin to a missing glass. Lena had made one small mistake the previous week, and she didn't want to give him another reason to scold her. She hurried toward table 7, weaving gracefully through the crowd, balancing the tray like she'd been doing it her whole life. The guests at that table were laughing loudly. One of them made a joke about how even the champagne tastes richer at charity events. Lena smiled politely, refilled their glasses, and stepped away without a sound. She caught a glimpse of herself in one of the large mirrors hanging on the wall, just for a second. The reflection showed a young woman who looked calm and composed, but behind her eyes there was something heavy, something tired. She wondered what her life might have been if she had stayed in music school. Would she be the one playing the piano tonight instead of serving drinks? A little later, during a short break between serving rounds, Lena slipped into a quiet corner near the service entrance. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. The music still played softly in the background, echoing faintly from the main room. For a few moments, she let herself drift into a daydream. She imagined herself sitting at the piano again, her fingers moving freely, the crowd watching, not as a waitress, but as a performer. She smiled faintly at the thought, then sighed. It felt silly to imagine something like that now. Dreams were for people who had time and money. She had bills to pay and a mother who depended on her. Music was a luxury she could no longer afford. Her short break ended when another staff member called her name. She straightened her vest, adjusted her hair, and went back out. The night was only halfway over. As she walked back into the ballroom, she noticed the pianist cough a few times, taking sips of water between songs. His hands trembled slightly as he played. He was clearly not feeling well, though he kept going, determined to finish his performance. Lena felt a pang of sympathy for him. She knew what it was like to push through exhaustion just to keep working. By now, the guests were getting livelier. Some had moved to the small dance floor. Others stood in groups chatting. The golden lights shimmered over everything, making it look like a scene from a movie. But behind the beauty was exhaustion, both for the staff and, she suspected, even for some of the guests pretending to be happy. As she moved past the piano again, Lena heard the pianist begin a familiar piece. Her breath caught. It was Claire de Lune, the same song she had played during her final recital in music school years ago. Without realizing, she slowed down. Her eyes softened, and her lips parted slightly as if she might whisper the notes along with him. The piece was hauntingly beautiful. The melody filled the room with something fragile and pure. She stood for a moment too long, lost in the sound. The world around her seemed to fade, the chatter, the clinking of glasses, the faint laughter. All that remained was the music. When the song ended, the room applauded politely. Lena blinked, suddenly aware of where she was. She quickly moved away before anyone noticed she'd stopped working. Her cheeks were warm with embarrassment, but her heart ached in a way she couldn't explain. By the time the pianist packed up his sheet music and left the stage for a short break, Lena was refilling water glasses near the back of the room. She watched him walk past, his steps slow and tired. He smiled faintly at her and she smiled back. She didn't know it then, but that small moment, the quiet exchange between a weary pianist and a wistful waitress, was the beginning of something that would soon change everything. For now, she just went back to work, unaware that fate was quietly arranging the next chapter of her life. The piano in the corner sat silent for a while, but its presence seemed to hum in the air, as if it was waiting for the right hands to return to it. And in that same room, as guests continued to drink and laugh under the glow of chandeliers, a girl who once gave up her dream was about to find it again in the most unexpected way. The night had grown deeper, and the energy inside the ballroom was beginning to shift. The laughter was louder now, the music softer, and the glow from the chandeliers reflected like gold on every glass in the room. The guests were comfortable, relaxed, and full of good food and wine. Lena was clearing empty plates from one of the side tables when she noticed a small commotion near the piano. Two staff members were talking quietly to each other, their expressions tense. The pianist had stepped outside during his break, and now, someone whispered that he was not feeling well at all. He was sitting in the corridor, pale and shaky, saying he might not be able to continue. The event manager, Mr. Hales, appeared almost instantly, his face tight with worry. The background music had stopped completely, and the silence felt strange after hours of soft piano playing. Guests were starting to notice. Some looked around curiously, wondering why the music had ended. Lena was close enough to hear Mr. Hales speaking quickly to one of the staff members. "We need someone to fill in. Anything. We can't have dead air at an event like this. It looks unprofessional." "But sir," the staff member said nervously, "we don't have another musician booked." Mr. Hales ran a hand through his hair. "There has to be someone. Maybe a DJ? A recording? Something. We can't just—" Before he could finish, Lena felt something stir inside her. She hesitated, her hands gripping the tray tightly. Her heart began to beat faster. She knew this was not her place. She was a waitress, not a performer. But still, the thought pushed through all her doubts. She took a small breath and stepped closer. "Sir," she said quietly, "I can play." Mr. Hales turned, surprised. What did you say? Lena swallowed hard. I can play the piano. I've had training before. He blinked as if trying to process the idea. You? Yes, she said softly. If you want, I could play a few songs until he's better. The other staff members exchanged glances. It wasn't that they doubted her, but the idea sounded almost ridiculous. A waitress in uniform sitting down to play at a luxury gala filled with high-profile guests. Mr. Hales frowned, clearly unsure. This is a high-end event, he said carefully. We can't risk anything that might look unprofessional. I understand, Lena said quickly, but I promise I can play. Just give me one song. If it doesn't work, I'll stop right away. There was a short silence. The soft hum of conversations in the ballroom made the quiet between them feel louder. Finally, Mr. Hales looked toward the empty piano, then back at her. His practical side was fighting with his fear of embarrassment. He exhaled. All right, one song. But if it goes wrong, you walk away immediately. Understood? Lena nodded quickly, her heart thudding so hard she could feel it in her chest. Understood. She set down her tray on the service table and wiped her slightly trembling hands on her apron. As she walked toward the piano, she could feel eyes following her. A few of the guests noticed her approaching the instrument and looked confused. One of them whispered something to his companion, who laughed softly, thinking it must be some kind of entertainment stunt. Lena sat down on the piano bench. For a moment she just stared at the keys. Her reflection shimmered faintly on the glossy black surface. It felt unreal, like she was in a dream where everything was too bright, too loud, too impossible. Her fingers hovered over the keys. The room wasn't silent anymore. It was expectant. She could feel the curiosity in the air. She took a deep breath. The first notes she played were soft and hesitant, like testing the water. Her touch was gentle, almost shy. A few people at nearby tables stopped talking. The melody began to form, slow, familiar, and soothing. Within seconds, the uncertainty in her hands started to fade. It was like something inside her woke up again. The years of silence melted away, and suddenly she remembered everything, the sound, the rhythm, the way her body and the music moved together like one thing. Her fingers found the keys as if they'd never forgotten them. The soft notes flowed through the air, wrapping around the guests like a warm breeze. Conversations grew quieter and heads began to turn. The sound was different from the professional pianists, less polished but full of something else. It had emotion, tenderness, a kind of honesty that made people stop and listen. Lena forgot where she was. She forgot the guests, the uniforms, the fear. She played from her heart, each note filled with all the things she had kept inside for years: grief, hope, love, and longing. Across the room, Mr. Hale stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. He had expected a disaster. Instead, he was watching something beautiful unfold. Even the servers near the back had stopped working for a moment just to listen. The melody swelled, gentle but powerful. Lena's posture changed. She sat taller, her movements confident. Her hands seemed to dance across the keys, and every time her fingers lifted, the echo of the notes lingered in the air like tiny stars fading. When the song ended, there was silence. A deep, stunned silence. Then someone clapped. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room erupted into applause. The sound filled the space, rising like a wave. Lena blinked, realizing what had just happened. Her face flushed as she smiled nervously and looked around. She didn't know where to look first. People were clapping, some even standing. A few guests near the front tables looked genuinely moved. Mr. Hales approached the piano slowly, his expression a mix of shock and admiration. That was incredible, he said softly. Would you mind playing another piece? Lena hesitated, glancing around. Are you sure? Absolutely, he said, almost laughing in disbelief. Please, so she did. She played again, this time something livelier but still filled with feeling. The rhythm lifted the room. The laughter softened, replaced by awe. Even the photographers had turned their cameras toward her now, snapping pictures as the staff looked on, amazed. By the time she finished the second song, Lena was smiling. Not out of pride, but out of joy, the kind she hadn't felt in years. She could see people whispering, gesturing toward her, their expressions warm and curious. When she stood up from the piano bench, the crowd clapped again, louder than before. She gave a small, respectful nod and quickly stepped back, returning to the service area, her heart still racing. The other staff members surrounded her as soon as she was out of sight of the guests. "That was amazing," one of them whispered. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Lena laughed quietly, a little embarrassed. "It's been a long time. I didn't even know if I could still do it." Mr. Hales came over a moment later, still shaking his head in wonder. "I've worked in events for 20 years, he said, and I've never seen anything like that." "You just saved the night." Lena smiled shyly. "I'm glad it helped." He nodded, still a little dazed. "You're going to finish your shift, but after that, I want to talk to you. You have talent, Lena. Real talent." She nodded, unsure what to say. Her hands still trembled slightly from the adrenaline, but her heart felt light, lighter than it had in a long time. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Guests came up to the serving area to ask about the waitress who played the piano. Some even asked for her name. A few left business cards with the manager, saying they wanted to invite her to future events. When the ballroom finally emptied and the last of the guests drifted out into the night, Lena helped clean up as usual. But this time everything felt different. The same tiredness weighed on her feet, but her heart was glowing. As she walked past the grand piano one last time, she stopped and rested her hand on the smooth surface. The instrument was silent again, but she could still feel the echo of the music she'd played. She smiled quietly to herself. For years she had believed her dream was gone forever, but tonight something had changed. Something small, maybe, but real. And as she looked around the now empty ballroom, she realized that sometimes life gives you a second chance when you least expect it. You just have to be brave enough to take it. When Lena woke up the next morning, it took her a few seconds to remember everything that had happened the night before. For a moment, she thought it had all been a dream. The shining lights, the grand piano, the sound of applause that had filled the ballroom. But then she saw the black dress and neatly folded apron hanging over the back of a chair, and it all came rushing back. She sat on the edge of her small bed, smiling to herself. The apartment was quiet, just a faint hum of traffic outside. Sunlight came through the curtains, lighting up the cracked paint on the walls. It wasn't much, but today it all felt different. Her mother called from the kitchen. "You're up early. Did you sleep well?" Lena nodded, tying her hair back. "Yeah, I did." Her mother looked at her curiously. "You're smiling." "That's new," Lena laughed softly. "Something nice happened at work last night." "Oh?" She hesitated. "I played the piano at the event. The pianist got sick and I filled in for him." Her mother stopped stirring her coffee. "You played? After all this time?" "Yeah," Lena said quietly, her eyes bright. "It just sort of happened. They asked me to fill in for a bit, and I did." Her mother smiled gently. "I always knew that piano wasn't done with you." Lena shrugged, trying to act casual, but her heart was still warm from the memory. She could still hear the echo of her music in her mind, and the way the crowd had reacted. It felt unreal. When she arrived at the hotel later that day, the usual quiet morning routine was different. A few co-workers looked at her with grins, whispering to each other as she walked by. "There she is," one of them said. "The star of last night." Lena rolled her eyes playfully. "Don't start," she said, trying not to blush, but they kept teasing, all in good fun. "You should have seen the manager after you played," another said. "He looked like he'd just seen a miracle." She laughed, embarrassed but happy. It was the first time in a long while she felt truly proud of herself. Not long after, Mr. Hales called her into his office. He was standing by the window talking on the phone, but when he saw her, he waved her in and ended the call. "Lena," he said, smiling for once, "I've been waiting to talk to you." She straightened, nervous again. "Is everything all right?" "More than all right," he said. "That performance last night, it was remarkable. I've had 3 people reach out this morning asking about you. They want to know who you are, where you trained, if you perform regularly." Lena blinked, stunned. "They asked about me?" "Yes, one of them is from a local cultural foundation, another from an art magazine, and someone else left a card asking if you'd be willing to perform at another event next month." She didn't know what to say. Her mind was spinning. Mr. Hales continued. "I told them I'd pass along the messages to you. I don't know what you plan to do with all this, but it seems you made quite an impression." He handed her a few business cards. The paper felt heavy in her hands, important, like something from another world. "Thank you," she said softly. "You've got talent, Lena," he said sincerely. Don't let it go to waste again. She nodded, her throat tight. After she left his office, she tucked the cards safely into her bag. For the rest of her shift, she moved quietly, lost in thought. Every now and then, a co-worker would smile at her, or a guest would mention her performance from the night before. The attention made her shy, but it also filled her with a quiet joy she couldn't hide. When her shift ended, she didn't go straight home. Instead, she walked toward the city's old music store, the one she used to visit when she was a student. The familiar scent of wood and sheet music hit her the moment she walked in. An elderly man behind the counter looked up. It's been a long time since I've seen you," he said kindly. Lena smiled. "Yes, it has. I just wanted to see if you still had any used keyboards for sale." He nodded and led her to the back. She found a small digital piano, not fancy, but it worked. The keys were a little stiff, but it was affordable. She spent part of her savings to buy it, then carried it home on the bus, her arms aching but her heart light. That evening, after dinner, she set it up in the small living room. Her mother sat on the couch watching quietly as Lena plugged it in and tested the keys. The first sound that came out was a little rough, but it still made her smile. She began to play softly. The melody that filled the room wasn't perfect, but it was alive. Her mother listened, tears in her eyes. "You haven't lost it," she whispered. Lena shook her head, her voice gentle. "I thought I had, but maybe it was just waiting for me." Over the next few days, Lena's story began to spread around the hotel. Guests who had attended the event told others about the waitress who played like a professional. A short video someone recorded on their phone even started to circulate on social media. The clip showed her sitting at the piano in her uniform, her hair tied back, completely lost in the music. The caption read, "Talent can be found anywhere." Within a week, the video had thousands of views. People commented things like, "She plays with real feeling," and "You can see the emotion in her face." Lena was both excited and nervous. She wasn't used to attention. She still went to work every day, still cleaned tables and served drinks. But now people sometimes recognized her. Some guests even asked if she'd play again. One evening, as she was leaving work, she saw a man waiting near the hotel entrance. He was middle-aged, dressed neatly with a kind smile. "Are you Lena?" he asked. She nodded cautiously. "My name's Peter. I was at the gala last week," he said. "I work with the city's Art and Music Foundation. We'd like to invite you to perform at our annual fundraiser next month." Lena stared at him, speechless. "Me perform?" "Yes," he said warmly. "We'd love to have you. It's not a formal concert, more of a community showcase. I think people would love to hear you again." Her first instinct was to say no. The fear of failing, of not being good enough, crept up fast. But then she thought about how it had felt that night at the gala. The sound, the joy, the applause. "I'd be honored," she said finally. Peter smiled. "Wonderful. I'll send you the details." After he left, Lena stood there for a long moment, letting it sink in. She could hardly believe it. Just a week ago, she was invisible, a quiet waitress no one noticed. And now, people wanted to hear her play again. That night, she practiced for hours. Her fingers were sore, but she didn't care. She tried new songs, experimented with old ones she used to love. Music filled the apartment until late into the night. Her mother peeked into the room, smiling softly. "You're glowing," she said. Lena laughed. "I just feel alive again." The next morning, she woke up early and played again before work. Each note felt like a small step toward something new, something she had almost lost forever. In the weeks that followed, she practiced every chance she got. Sometimes, after finishing her shifts, she would sneak into the hotel ballroom when it was empty and play softly to the echo of her own music bouncing off the marble walls. One night, while she was doing just that, she didn't realize Mr. Hales had been standing near the doorway listening quietly. When she finally stopped, he stepped forward and said, "You know, I could get in trouble for letting you use this piano after hours." She turned, startled. "I'm sorry, he smiled. "Relax, I'm not angry. I just think it's amazing how the whole room feels different when you play." Lena looked down, smiling shyly. "Thank you. I guess I just love it too much to stop," he nodded. "Then don't stop." When she finally left that night, the city lights glimmered against the dark sky, and she felt a strange mix of peace and excitement. She didn't know what was waiting ahead, but she knew one thing. Music was back in her life, and she wasn't going to let it slip away again. As she walked home, she thought about how everything had changed because of one small moment, one choice to step forward when no one expected her to. It had taken just a few minutes of courage to turn an ordinary night into something extraordinary, and deep down, she felt that this was only the beginning. The evening of the fundraiser arrived faster than Lena expected. For days she had practiced every moment she could, before work, after work, even during her breaks when no one was around. She wanted to make sure she wouldn't let anyone down. It wasn't just about the notes. It was about the feeling. She wanted people to feel what she felt when she played. That morning she woke up early, unable to sleep any longer. The sunlight had barely touched the window, but she was already sitting at her small keyboard, her fingers brushing over the keys softly. She played one last song, the same one she had performed at the hotel, the one that had changed everything. It filled her little apartment with a kind of calm she needed. Her mother was already up, watching her quietly from the kitchen doorway. "You're ready," she said with a smile. Lena took a deep breath and nodded. "I hope so." "You've worked hard for this," her mother said gently. "No matter what happens tonight, I'm proud of you." Those words meant more to her than anything. Later that afternoon, she arrived at the community hall where the event was being held. It wasn't as grand as the hotel ballroom, but it was warm and welcoming, filled with people from all walks of life. The organizers were setting up chairs and decorations. On stage, there was a beautiful grand piano, polished and waiting. Peter, the man from the Music Foundation, greeted her warmly. "I'm so glad you came," he said. "We've been looking forward to hearing you." Lena smiled nervously. "Thank you for inviting me." He handed her a small badge with her name on it. "You're our closing performance tonight," he said. "We always end with something special." "I think you'll be perfect for that." Her stomach fluttered. Closing the show? That meant all eyes would be on her. She wasn't sure she was ready for that kind of pressure, but she nodded anyway. As the evening began, Lena stood backstage watching the other performers. There were singers, violinists, even a small children's choir. The audience clapped after every act, the atmosphere warm and supportive. When her turn finally came, her hands were trembling slightly. She could hear her heartbeat echoing in her ears. A stage assistant motioned for her to go up. She walked out under the lights, the quiet hum of the crowd falling into complete silence. For a brief second, the sight overwhelmed her. The rows of faces, the glow of the spotlights, the camera flashes. Then she sat down at the piano. The first few seconds were hard. Her hands felt stiff, her breathing uneven, but when she pressed the first key, the world seemed to pause. The sound of the piano, warm and familiar, surrounded her like an old friend. Slowly, her fear began to fade away. She played a soft, flowing melody she had written herself, a piece that told her own story without words. It started slow and quiet, then grew stronger, filled with hope and emotion. The audience leaned in, caught by the beauty and simplicity of it. Every note carried a part of her past: the little girl who learned to play on a secondhand piano, the teenager who dreamed of being on stage, the young woman who thought she'd lost it all, and now, the woman who had found her courage again. As she played, her face relaxed, her eyes half closed. It didn't feel like a performance anymore. It felt like breathing, like coming home. When the last note faded, the room stayed silent for a heartbeat. Then suddenly applause erupted, loud, long, and full of warmth. Some people even stood up, cheering and whistling. Lena blinked, dazed. She hadn't expected that kind of reaction. She stood and bowed slightly, her cheeks flushed, her heart full. Peter came up on stage, smiling from ear to ear. "That," he said into the microphone, "was incredible. Let's give her another round of applause." The clapping grew louder. Lena couldn't stop smiling. It wasn't just the applause. It was the feeling of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. After the show, several people came up to talk to her. Some congratulated her. Some asked about her story. She spoke with kindness and humility, telling them how she had once studied music but had to leave school. She didn't talk much about her struggles. She just said she was grateful for the chance to play again. A woman from a local newspaper asked for an interview. "Your story is so inspiring," she said. "People love hearing about second chances," Lena agreed, though part of her still couldn't believe anyone wanted to write about her. When she finally left the hall that night, the stars were out and the cool air brushed against her skin. She carried her small bag and the folded program with her name printed in it. She walked slowly, taking in everything: the sound of distant laughter, the feeling of peace settling in her chest. She thought about how far she had come in such a short time. A few weeks ago, she had been just another face in the crowd, serving drinks, quietly dreaming. And now, doors were opening that she never imagined could. The next morning, she returned to work at the hotel as usual. Life didn't suddenly change overnight. She still had her shifts, her duties, her uniform. But something in her had shifted. When she passed the grand piano in the ballroom, she didn't look away this time. She smiled. During her lunch break, she sat at one of the staff tables, scrolling through her phone. To her surprise, she saw a familiar video pop up again, the clip from the gala. But this time, it had been reposted by a major social media page. The caption read, "A waitress stuns guests with a breathtaking piano performance." The video had over 100,000 views. Comments flooded the screen. This gave me chills. She plays like she's telling a story. Someone give her a record deal already. Lena stared at the comments, half in disbelief. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When she showed it to her coworkers, they gathered around her phone, gasping and laughing. "You're famous," one of them said. She shook her head, smiling shyly. "I'm not famous, just lucky." But deep inside, she knew it wasn't just luck. It was years of practice, years of love for something she had refused to let go of completely. That afternoon, Mr. Hales called her into his office again. "I've been getting calls," he said. "People want to book you for events. Music events, not waiting jobs." Lena was speechless. "I know this isn't easy," he continued, "but maybe it's time you think about where you want to go from here. You have a gift, Lena. You shouldn't hide it behind a tray and an apron." She looked down, her voice soft. "It's scary." "What if I fail?" he smiled. "You've already done the hardest part. You started. Everything after that is just playing the next note." His words stayed with her long after she left his office. That evening, she sat by her keyboard again. The city lights twinkled outside her window. She started to play, slowly at first, then faster, letting the notes flow without thinking. She realized something important. It wasn't about perfection. It was about connection. The reason people reacted to her playing wasn't because she was flawless, but because she was honest. Every sound came from her heart. A few days later, the newspaper article was published. It told her story simply but beautifully. From waitress to pianist, how one night changed everything. The response was overwhelming. Strangers sent her messages online, thanking her for inspiring them. Some said they had gone back to their old hobbies after watching her video. Others said her story gave them hope. Reading those messages made Lena tear up. She realized that her music was doing what she always dreamed it would. It was touching people. One night she came home late after another shift. Her mother was asleep and the apartment was quiet. Lena walked over to her little keyboard and sat down. Her fingers hovered above the keys and she whispered to herself, "Thank you." Then she began to play. It was soft, gentle, and full of peace. She didn't need an audience this time. She didn't need applause. She just needed the sound, the proof that her dream was still alive. As the notes filled the air, she thought about how life could surprise you when you least expected it. A single moment could change the entire rhythm of your world, and sometimes the music you thought was lost forever finds its way back, just when you're ready to listen again. And that night, sitting in her small living room with nothing but a keyboard and her thoughts, Lena knew in her heart that this was only the start of something bigger, something beautiful. A few weeks had passed since the fundraiser, and life had taken a new rhythm for Lena. The quiet girl who once balanced trays in the hotel dining room was now being noticed for something entirely different. Every day brought a small surprise, another message, another call, another chance. The morning sunlight spilled through her window as she sat with a cup of tea, her phone buzzing constantly with notifications. She smiled as she read the messages, people she'd never met from places she'd never been, all writing to say how her music had touched them. Some said they'd seen the viral video online and cried. Others said it made them pick up their old instruments again. It was strange, she thought, how something so small, a few minutes of playing a piano, could ripple out so far. That day, she had to go to the hotel for her shift, but she wasn't just another waitress anymore. Her coworkers treated her differently now. They looked at her with pride, sometimes teasing her playfully. "Don't forget us when you're famous," one said with a grin. Lena laughed. I'll still come by and make coffee for you, she replied. Even Mr. Hales seemed different. He smiled more often when he saw her and sometimes asked how her music was going. He'd even offered her flexible hours, so she could have time for rehearsals and new opportunities. One afternoon, as she was clearing tables, a woman approached her. She looked elegant, dressed in a simple but stylish outfit and carried a calm air of confidence. "Excuse me," the woman said kindly. "You're the pianist, aren't you?" Lena hesitated for a moment, unsure how to answer. "I play a little," she said shyly. The woman smiled. "A little? I saw your video. It was wonderful. My name's Clara. I organize performances for community arts programs. Would you be interested in playing at one of our events?" Lena blinked in surprise. "You mean perform again?" "Yes," Clara said warmly. "It's a charity event. Nothing fancy, but we love featuring local talent." "You'd be perfect," Lena hesitated. She still wasn't used to saying yes to things like this, but something inside her, something new and brave, whispered that she should. "I'd love to," she said finally. That evening she told her mother about it while they were having dinner. Her mother's eyes lit up. "You see? People are starting to notice you. All that hard work is paying off." Lena nodded, smiling softly. "It still doesn't feel real sometimes." Her mother reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "It's real, sweetheart. You just have to keep believing in yourself." The days leading up to the event were busy. Lena practiced every chance she got. She picked a few pieces she loved, some soft and familiar, others more daring. The sound filled their small apartment, and even the neighbors sometimes paused to listen through the walls. On the night of the performance, the venue was packed. It wasn't a luxury ballroom this time, but a cozy hall filled with families, students, and local artists. The air buzzed with excitement and warmth. Clara greeted her at the door. "I'm so glad you're here," she said. "You're closing the show again. Everyone's looking forward to hearing you." Lena smiled nervously. "I hope I don't disappoint." "You won't," Clara assured her. As she waited backstage, Lena could hear the sound of laughter and applause from the crowd. Each act was unique: singers, poets, dancers. It reminded her that art came in many forms, and every person there was sharing a piece of their heart. When it was finally her turn, the lights dimmed, and her name was announced. The audience clapped warmly as she walked to the piano. She could feel her heart pounding, but there was also a deep sense of calm beneath it. She sat down, took a deep breath, and began to play. The first notes drifted softly through the room. It was a melody she had written just a few days earlier, a piece inspired by the feeling of rediscovering something you thought was gone. It started slow and delicate, then built into something fuller, richer and alive. As she played, the crowd grew silent. The only sound was the music, flowing like a gentle stream. For Lena, time disappeared again. There was no audience, no pressure, no fear, only her and the piano. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the music speak for her. When the last note faded, the audience erupted in applause. Some people stood clapping loudly, smiling and cheering. Lena looked up, blinking away tears. She bowed slightly and smiled. It was another small miracle, another night she would never forget. After the performance, Clara came up to her, still smiling. "That was beautiful," she said. "You really have something special. Would you like to join our music circle? We meet every week and we're planning more events soon." Lena hesitated for only a second before nodding. "Yes, I'd love to." From then on, her life began to change in little ways. She still worked at the hotel, but now her evenings were filled with music. She practiced with other musicians, shared ideas, learned new techniques, and even began writing more of her own pieces. She didn't have much money, but it didn't matter. Every time she sat at a piano, she felt rich in a way that couldn't be measured. Weeks turned into months, and her name started to appear more often, on flyers, social media posts, and event programs. People started recognizing her face. Once, a little girl approached her after a performance, holding her mother's hand. "I want to play piano like you one day," she said softly. Lena knelt down and smiled. "You can," she said. "All you need is love for the music and patience. The rest will come." The girl grinned and hugged her before running off. It was a small moment, but to Lena it meant the world. At home, her mother watched her with quiet pride. "You're glowing these days," she said one night. "I feel alive again," Lena admitted. "It's like I've found the part of me I lost." Her mother smiled. You never lost it, dear. You just needed the right moment to let it shine. One day she received an email that made her pause. It was from a music school, the very one she had once attended years ago before she had to drop out. The message was short but kind. They had seen her performances online and wanted to invite her to speak to their students about her journey. Her heart raced as she read it again and again. She couldn't believe it. When the day came, she walked through the doors of that familiar building with mixed emotions. Nervousness, pride, nostalgia. She could almost see her younger self walking those halls again, full of dreams. The classroom was filled with students, all eager and bright-eyed. The teacher introduced her as an example of perseverance and passion. Lena smiled shyly, not used to such words. She told them her story, not about fame or success, but about struggle, patience, and the love of music. She spoke simply and honestly, just like she played. When she finished, one student raised his hand. Did you ever think about giving up? He asked. Lena thought for a moment. Many times, she admitted. But then I realized that music wasn't something I could really give up. It's part of who I am. Even when I wasn't playing, it was still there, waiting for me. The room was quiet for a moment. Then the students clapped softly and a few smiled at her with admiration. Afterward, as she walked out of the building, she felt lighter, freer. She realized that her story wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been afraid to follow their dream. Later that evening, she sat by her piano again. The city outside was calm, the streets glowing under the soft lights. She pressed her fingers to the keys and the first notes filled the air. It wasn't a song she had practiced or planned. It was something new, something born right in that moment. It was warm, full of hope and peace. As she played, she smiled to herself. She had no idea what the future would bring. Maybe more performances, maybe something else entirely, but she knew one thing for sure. She had found her place again. The music had brought her there, one note at a time. And as the melody carried softly through the night, she realized that she didn't need applause or fame to be happy. She just needed the piano, her heart, and the courage to keep playing. Months had turned into a year since that unforgettable night at the hotel. The night that had changed everything for Lena. Life was different now, but in a way that still felt grounded, real, and filled with purpose. She wasn't a celebrity, not the kind people chased for autographs or followed with cameras, but she was something better, someone who inspired others just by doing what she loved. Her music had found its way into people's hearts. She had played at small concerts, schools, and even a few charity events. Her name started appearing in local newspapers more often and sometimes on social media, but she still lived simply. She still helped her mother around the house, still went on walks through the same streets, and still practiced late into the night. What had changed most was inside her. She had learned to believe in herself again. That morning, Lena sat by her piano, sipping tea as sunlight touched the keys. Her phone buzzed and she picked it up. It was a message from Clara, the woman who had invited her to the community events. Big news. There's going to be a citywide music festival next month. They want you to perform on the main stage. Lena blinked, reading it twice. The main stage. That was something she had only dreamed of. Thousands of people would be there. The thought scared her and thrilled her all at once. She called Clara right away. Are you sure? She asked, almost whispering. Clara laughed gently. Of course. You've earned it. The organizers saw your last performance online and loved it. They think your story will inspire the audience. Lena hesitated, her heart racing. I don't know if I'm ready for something that big. You are, Clara said firmly. Trust yourself. After the call ended, Lena sat quietly, staring at her piano. For a long moment, she didn't play. She just listened to the quiet hum of the city outside. Then she smiled softly and touched the keys. The sound echoed through the room, gentle and steady. That night, she told her mother the news. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. You see, I told you this was just the beginning, she said proudly. Lena laughed shyly. It still feels unreal. Maybe, her mother said. But it's real. You've worked for this. The weeks that followed were filled with preparation. Lena practiced every day, sometimes until midnight. She chose a few of her best pieces, songs that told her story without words. Each note held a piece of her journey, from the quiet girl who once waited tables to the woman now standing on the edge of her biggest moment. The day of the festival arrived, bright and warm. The park was buzzing with energy. Food stalls, lights, laughter, and music everywhere. The stage stood tall at the center, surrounded by thousands of people. Lena could feel her nerves kicking in as she walked backstage, clutching her small music notebook. Clara greeted her with a hug. "You're going to do great," she said. Lena smiled nervously. "I hope so." She peeked out from behind the curtain. The crowd was huge, more than she'd ever seen. Some held banners, others sat on picnic blankets, chatting and smiling. The atmosphere was alive, full of excitement. As she waited for her turn, she watched other performers take the stage. Each one brought something special. Some sang, some danced, some played instruments. Every act was met with cheers and applause. When her name was announced, her heart leaped. She walked out slowly, the lights bright and warm on her face. The audience clapped politely, and she smiled shyly before sitting at the piano. She took a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly, but as soon as her fingers touched the keys, everything else faded away. The first song she played was soft and tender, a melody she had written in her tiny apartment, the one that had comforted her on lonely nights. The notes floated gently through the air, weaving through the crowd. Then, without stopping, she moved into another piece. This one was stronger, filled with passion and emotion. It told the story of how she had lost her way and found it again through music. The audience grew quiet, completely still. Even the distant chatter faded. It felt like everyone was holding their breath, listening not just to the sound but to the feeling behind it. By the time she reached the final song, the sun was beginning to set. The sky turned shades of orange and gold, and the lights on the stage glowed softly. She paused for a moment, looking at the piano, at her hands, then at the crowd. "This last song," she said into the microphone, her voice a little shaky but warm, "is about hope. It's about remembering that no matter how far you drift from your dream, it can always find its way back to you." The audience listened quietly. Then she began to play. It was a slow, emotional piece, full of rises and falls like waves. It carried sadness and joy all at once, a perfect reflection of her journey. Her fingers moved gracefully, her heart guiding every note. When the last sound faded into silence, there was a moment where everything stood still. Then all at once the crowd erupted in applause. People stood clapping, cheering, some even whistling. The sound rolled across the park like thunder. Lena's chest tightened with emotion. She stood and bowed, tears glimmering in her eyes. She could see faces smiling back at her, children, couples, elderly people, all touched by the music. And for a moment she felt completely at peace. After the show, people came up to her to thank her. Some wanted to take pictures, others just wanted to shake her hand. She tried to take it all in, feeling grateful and humbled. A man from a local recording studio approached her and handed her a card. "If you ever want to record your music," he said, "call me. I think people would love to hear more." She took the card, smiling softly. "Thank you," she said. That night when she returned home, she sat by the window with a cup of tea, the sound of the city still buzzing faintly in the distance. Her mother sat beside her, holding the small bouquet of flowers Lena had received from a fan. "You did it," her mother said gently. Lena smiled. "We did it," she corrected. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable and content. Then Lena turned toward her piano and touched the keys lightly. "Do you think I should make an album?" she asked with a laugh. Her mother chuckled. "I think you should do whatever makes you happy." The next few weeks moved quickly. Calls came in, interviews, collaborations, small offers from studios. Lena didn't rush into anything. She wanted to take her time, to make sure every step stayed true to who she was. She continued to work part-time at the hotel, not because she had to, but because she liked being around familiar faces. The piano in the lobby became her favorite place again. Sometimes after her shift, she'd sit down and play softly. Guests would stop and listen, smiling as they passed by. One afternoon, a young waiter came up to her after she finished playing. "I've been learning piano too," he said shyly. "Watching you, it makes me think I can do it." Lena smiled warmly. "You can," she said. "Just keep playing, even when no one's listening." As the months passed, her music reached more people. A few of her recordings went online and gathered thousands of views. But she didn't measure her success in numbers anymore. It was in the letters she received, the smiles she saw, the quiet moments when someone said her music helped them through a hard time. And one evening, as she sat alone by her piano, she thought about everything. The years she'd spent doubting herself, the struggles, the unexpected turns, and all the beautiful surprises that followed. If someone had told her back then that a single night at a luxury event would change her life, she would have laughed. But it had. Not because it made her famous, but because it reminded her of who she was meant to be. She pressed a few keys and began to play softly, the melody calm and pure. It was a song about gratitude, about life, about dreams, about how every ending can be the start of something new. Outside, the moonlight spilled across her window, gentle and silver. She closed her eyes, letting the music flow somewhere out there. She knew someone was listening, someone who needed hope, just like she once did. And if her music could give them even a moment of peace, then it was all worth it. Because sometimes, the most beautiful stories aren't about fame or fortune. They're about people finding their way back to what they love. And Lena had done just that. She had found her song again.